We start today the Gemara towards the bottom of Daf Pei Daled Amud Beis, about 7 lines from the bottom, where it says Itmer. We're talking over here about the Isser of breaking any of the bones of the Korban Pesach. So there was a long discussion there when exactly that applies. The Gemara had a Braisa, an argument between Rebbe and the Rabbanon, with 8 different pshatim in this Braisa. And there was a discussion before whether there has to be a kezayis of basar in that exact area where you're breaking the bone in order for the issa to apply. And here the Gemara brings that this is an argument between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Itmar, we learned this argument. Eiver she'ein alav kezayis basar b'makom zeh. So you have a bone, a limb that does not have any kezayis of meat in this place where you're cutting it. But v'yesh alav kezayis basar b'makom acher. But there is a kezayis of meat in another place on this limb. Rabbi Yochanan says, Yesh by Mishum Shviris Etzem, the Isser of breaking the bone applies. It has a kezayis in another area. Shimon ben Lakish said, Ein by Mishum Shviris Etzem. There's no Isser to break the bone if in that spot where you're cutting it, where you're breaking the bone, there's no kezayis of basar. Eis for Rabbi Yochanan Shimon ben Lakish. So he asked Reish Lakish the question. It says in a Braisa as follows: Ve'etzem lo yisishperu boi. Don't break the bone. So the Braisa says Echad etzem sheyesh alav kezayis basar. The Isser is both in a case where there is a kezayis of meat, and ve'echad etzem she'ein alav kezayis basar, and even in a case where you don't have a kezayis of meat. So what does the Braisa mean when it says even when there's no kezayis, the Isser still applies? My ein alav kezayis basar. What does it mean when it says that if there's no kezayis basar, the Issa still applies? Are we talking about a limb that has no meat on it at all? Why would there be an Issa to break the bone? That everybody agrees, if there's no basar at all, that there's no Issa to break it. Elolav. So what does this Braisa mean? It means as follows. Echad etzem sheyesh alav kezayis b'mokim zeh. Both a bone that has meat, a kezayis of meat there in the spot where you're cutting it. Ve'echad she'ein alav kezayis basa b'mokim zeh, and also a bone that does not have a kezayis of meat in this spot. But ve'yesh alav kezayis basa b'mokim acher. But there is a kezayis of meat in another place on this bone, on this limb, and you're not allowed to cut it in this area. So it's a question in Reish Lakish that says that in such a case you are allowed to cut it because there's no kezayis right there in the spot that you're cutting it. So Reish Lakish answered like, that's not necessarily the pshat in this Braisa. It means something else. This is what the Braisa meant to say. Both when it comes to a bone that has a kezayis of meat on the outside of it, the flesh outside, and a bone that does not have any flesh on the outside, but there is a kezayis of meat on the inside, meaning b'makom shvira, in the place where you're breaking it, meaning there's a lot of marrow inside the bone. You have a big, thick bone, and there's enough marrow inside. There's a kezayis of meat inside. And that's what the Braisa is saying, that here as well, the issa to break the bone applies. And the Gemara now brings another Braisa to prove this point. Tanya, so we learned so in a Braisa, another Braisa as well. Don't break any bone from the Korban Pesach. This includes both a bone, even though there's marrow inside, and also a bone that has no marrow inside. So when the Torah says you have to eat the meat of the Korban Pesach, and you have to eat all of it. There should be no nicer. So does that include the marrow? No, you can't eat the marrow because you can't break it to take it out. So what does the pasuk mean when it says you have to eat the meat? The basar she'al gabei etzem. You only eat the meat that's outside, on the bone, the flesh on the outside, but not the marrow on the inside. Now the Braisa continues and says, maybe not. Or perhaps we should say, ela b'basar she'b'toich etzem. That when the pasuk says the mitzvah to eat of all the meat of the Korban Pesach, maybe it does include also that you have to eat the marrow inside of the bones as well. What am I going to do with the fact that the Torah says don't break any of the bones? Maybe the Torah is only saying that regarding a bone that there's no marrow, so you're not allowed to break it. But a bone that has marrow inside, maybe there the mitzvah of eating the meat includes the marrow and you have to break it open and take it out. And v'yal titma, and don't wonder how you're allowed to break the bone to eat the meat inside. You're being over on the lav. You're breaking the bone. Shaharei yave esse v'yitche lois esse. We have a cloud that an esse pushes off a lois esse. So if you have an esse to eat the marrow inside, and there's a lois esse not to break the bones, so you deiche the lois esse and you eat the meat inside. That's what I would say. So maybe you actually could break the bone for the marrow inside. Now this lashon the Gemara here says that an esse is deiche lois esse. This is the usual cloud that we have, that an esse pushes off a lois esse. But according to some Rishonim, the Gemara does not mean that here, because esse is only deicha lois esse is if when you're breaking the lois esse, you're actually fulfilling an esse at that very moment. Like for example, a person that's wearing tzitzis with kalayim, as he puts on the tzitzis, which is kalayim, he's fulfilling the mitzvah of tzitzis. Here, however, he's breaking the bone, he's being over the lois esse, and only afterwards does he take the marrow out and eat it. So it's not happening at the same time. And the klal is you don't say esse deicha lois esse if it's not at the same time. So therefore. Yeah, Mila on Shabbos. Okay, over there it is at the same time, right? Right. So over here, somebody Shainim say, when the Gemara uses the expression Yave Esse v'yitche lois esse, doesn't mean the klal of Esse deicha lois esse. What the Gemara is saying is that over here, the way we have to understand the Esse and the lois esse is that the lois esse of breaking the bone will only apply in a case where there is no marrow. But in a case where there is, so then there's an Esse that says that in this case the Torah wants you to eat the marrow and therefore you could break the bone. That's what the Gemara means by this. So the Gemara says, the Braisa, however, concludes, no, that's not the case. Because Kashahu Oymer, V'etzim lo yishpere by Pesach Sheni, the Torah writes again, this Isser, that you're not allowed to break the bone by the Pesach Sheni, She'ein Talmud Loimer, and it's not necessary for the Torah to write this Isser again. Sha'arei kvar nema. It says by the Pesach Sheni, K'chol chukas ha-Pesach yasu oisei, that all the halachas that apply to the first Korban Pesach apply by the second. So why does it have to say again not to break the bone? The Torah is repeating it a second time. Echad etzem sheyesh bei mayach, both a bone that has marrow inside, ve'echad etzem she'ein bei mayach, and the bone that has no marrow inside. In both of those cases, the Isser applies. According to the Shlakish, that's what the Braisa before meant when it says whether it has a kazayis, whether it doesn't have a kazayis. It was referring to the marrow inside. How are you going to eat it? You don't. The marrow inside you don't eat, and that becomes nicer, and you have to burn it. Meisvei question. Yeah, true. Can't eat it. Meisvei eve sheyatsa miktsasai. An aver, a limb of an animal of the Korban Pesach. That is. This is a Mishnah right here on Amud Beis, as we'll learn soon. So one limb, that part of it went out of Yerushalayim, and part of it is still inside. So the part that's outside becomes pasul. The part that's inside is still kosher. So what do you do? You can't just cut the bone in half and eat it because you're not allowed to cut it. So what do you do? Chaytech ad mokim sheyagia ad mokim shemagia le'etzem. So you cut the meat until you reach the bone. And then v'kaila, if you peel away the good meat, ad shemagia le'peirik, until you come to a joint, and v'chaytech, and you cut off the bone over there, or you're cutting at the joint, and you throw out that limb that went out. So now you separated the meat that's good and the meat that's not good, the meat that went outside and the meat that was inside, and you're able to eat the meat that was good. Now, if you're going to say that as long as it's a limb, that there's no kazayis of meat in this place, and there is a kazayis in another place, there's no issue with breaking the bone. Why does he have to peel away the good meat until he comes to a joint, and there he can cut it and throw out the entire bone? Nikloiv bei porte, let him peel away the meat in that place, the good meat, let him peel away in that place the meat. And then v'nitpere, and break it right over there. Once you peel away the meat, so now there's no kazayas of meat right over there. Even if there's a kazayas of meat and another part of the limb, but right there you peeled it away, there's no kazayas of meat. From this Gemara, you see, I mentioned this when we learned the Gemara yesterday, that when the Gemara says that if there's no kazayas of meat, you can break the bone, that means even if before there was. Doesn't mean that it's an area in the limb where there never was a kazayas of meat. Even if there was a kazayas of meat, but you ate it up and you peeled it away, now there's no kazayas of meat there, you're able to break the bone. The Minchas Chinuch is medayik this from this Gemara. The Mishnah Lamelech as well says this concept, that as long as now there's no kazayas of meat, you can break the bone there. So Abaye says, technically you should be allowed to do it minatayre, but there's a gzeira, mishum poka. We're afraid that if we were going to allow you to break the meat over there where you peeled away the meat, But then, it may crack in another direction, and it may crack also in another part of the bone where there is a kazayas of meat. So therefore, there's a gzeira and it's not allowed. Ravina says what we're talking about in this Mishnah is bakulis. We're talking about a thigh bone, which has a kazayas of marrow inside. So even if you peel it away on the outside, there's still a kazayas of marrow inside right there where you're cutting it, so you can't cut it, even though there's no kazayas outside. Now the Gemara starts a new inyan. It brings a Mishnah that's towards the end of the Masechta, and then it connects it back to this Mishnah that we just quoted about a Korban Pesach, that one limb went partially outside of Yerushalayim. So Tanan Hasam, it says in the Mishnah in the end of the Masechta, Hapigol v'hanaisar, both pigol, which is when a kohen has a wrong machshava to eat it outside of the time that it's supposed to be eaten, or naisa, leftovers from the karbanis after the time that it's allowed to be eaten. Metamin esiyadayim. Chachamim were geyser that if you touch it, if a kohen touches it, his hands become tameh. So he becomes tameh through touching it. So what's the reason for this? The Gemara here brings an argument. Rav Huna and Rav Chisda argued about what's the reason for this. Chad Omar, one of them said the reason is mipnei chashdei kohuna, because we are suspecting the kayanim of making it piggle. We'll explain this in a second. V'chad Omar mipnei atzlei kohuna. Another opinion says that we're suspecting the kayanim of being lazy. So the Gemara explains, they're not really arguing. Mar masni a piggle. The one that says that the issue is that we suspect the kayanim, this refers to piggle. Or mar masni a naisar. And the other one was speaking about naisar. Man de masni a piggle, the one that was speaking about piggle, so he said, Mishum chajdei kohona. We suspect the kayanim. Now what do we suspect the kayanim regarding piggle? So Rashi says, what we suspect is that maybe a kayan has some issue, some hatred with this person. So here he's in a position of authority, that he has the carbon, and he's one that's doing it, and he could have a wrong machshava, and he could get this person back for something. So we're afraid that a kayan would do such a thing. So therefore, Chacham will geyser that if you make it piggle, and then you'll be touching it, you'll become tameh, and this will be a hassle for the kayan. He has to go to the mikveh, he can't continue doing his aveda. So that serves as a deterrent that the kayan shouldn't do such a thing. That's Rashi's pshat. Rabbeinu Chananel, other Rishonim say that the chashad is not that a kayan would do such a thing. We're not chayshad a kayan of doing this, but the chashad is that if you would see a kayan holding this meat of a carbon that's piggle, so it might seem like that he's eating it. It looks like he's eating piggle, and it's possible he's not allowed to eat it. So we don't want kayanim to be handling and touching this meat that's piggle. So therefore, they were geyser that it should be tameh, should make the kayan tameh if he touches it. So kayanim won't be handling this piggle meat, won't look like that they're eating it. Those are the two pshatim in chajdei kohona. Uman the masni naisar, the one that says that regarding naisar mishum atzlei kohona. So the reason why the chachamim were geyser that if you touch naisar you should be tameh, that's because of the kayanim that are lazy. They were lazy to finish all the meat that they had from the karbanis. They had a lot of meat to eat, and they were lazy to finish all the meat. So there were guys that if you don't finish the meat, then you touch the naisa, you become tameh. So again, that serves as a deterrent that they shouldn't leave it over. Now, but there is an argument though between them.
What are you going to do?
Huh?
What are you going to do?
You have to eat all the meat.
But
They'll become tameh. When they touch the naisa, they'll have to burn it, and they'll become tameh. They have to go to the mikveh. Mar masni kazayas. One opinion was that the tumah takes effect if you have the size of a kazayas. Or mar masni kebetza. Another opinion is that it has to be the size of a kebetza, which is larger than a kazayas. Manda masni kazayas, the one that says that the shear is a kazayas ki isurai, like the isser of neiser is a kazayas. Or manda masni kebetza, the one that says that the shear is a kebetza ki tumasai, that's the shear of tumah. You only the shear of tumas oichlin menatayra is if it's a kebetza. So the chachamim's gzeira as well was a kebetza. Now the Gemara has an ibaya, and this ibaya will connect back to the case that we spoke before about an aver that partially went outside of Yerushalayim. Ibaya, who the question was asked, Yaitze, regarding meat that leaves the place where it's supposed to be, whether it leaves out of the Azara or leaves out of Yerushalayim, Gazru Rabbanan Tumah, where Chachamim also geyser the same gzeira that if you touch it you become tameh, similar to pigel and naisar, which are also two psulim that they were geyser tumah. Oiloi, maybe here regarding a meat that leaves its place, they were not geyser. Mi amrinan, do I say naisar the gazru tumah? The reason why by naisar they made this tumah the asila tsulibei. Because over there's a reason. We're concerned that if not, they're going to be lazy. They're not going to finish what they're supposed to be eating. And similar also benegeh to pigel. We had the reason of the chashad. Avol yaitze afuke biyadayim le'mafkele biyadayim. Regarding yaitze, if something will leave its place out of Yerushalayim or out of the Azara, we're not afraid, we're not concerned that a kohen will go directly and take it out of its right place. So there's no reason to be geyser over there. So there, maybe chachamim, we're not geyser. So loy geyser be'rabbanan tumah. Oidilme loy shna, or maybe there's no distinction. Just like regarding pigel and noisa, chachamim were concerned and they were geyser the tumah. Maybe they were geyser the tumah also regarding meat that left its place out of the Azara or out of Yerushalayim. So here comes back the Mishnah that we mentioned before. So Toshama, I'll bring you a raya from this Mishnah. Eive sheyatza miktsasai, an eive, that part of it went out of the Yerushalayim by the Korban Pesach. So what do? Chaytech, you cut the meat until you reach the bone, and then the kailif, you peel away the good meat until you come to a joint, and the chaytech, and there you can cut it, and you throw out that limb that went out of Yerushalayim. Now, if you're going to say that what left Yerushalayim, so there's a tumah that took effect on that part that left Yerushalayim. So if so, what is he accomplishing by cutting the meat and separating the two parts, the meat that left Yerushalayim and the meat that did not leave Yerushalayim, and he's cutting it and he's peeling it away in order to eat it? If part of the meat left Yerushalayim, so that part became tamei, and it's touching the other part of the meat that's on the inside, so if it's touching it, so then it all should become tamei. So there's no point in peeling it away to eat that meat that did not leave Yerushalayim. Answers the Gemara, no, actually in such a case it will not become tamei because of the following rule. So the Gemara, tumas starimhi, this is a tumah where the tumah would be transmitted in a concealed place. The rule is when the tumah is transmitted in a concealed place, there is no tumah. Rashi here brings the source for this, that by the tumah, the Torah says that the yodov leishotav b'mayim, and yodov is hands which are open, which is exposed, and therefore tumah is only transmitted when you have two things that are touching each other in a way that the two things are exposed, open, and they come in contact each other. But over here, if you have the meat that's on one bone, on one limb, so it's the meat that's touching each other is under the skin. Inside, they're touching each other. But it's not two things that came together. It's one piece of meat that inside is touching each other. So if part of it became tamei, for it to be transmitted to the other part that did not become tamei, that it's on the inside, how is it transmitting it? Based on that's considered to be in a hidden place under the skin where it's touching each other. And therefore, the tumah is not transmitted.
The skin doesn't get tamei?
But in the place where it's touching, though, the skin does get tummy. But in the place of the contact, there's the part that went out, there's the part that did not go out. But in the place where it's touching, though, the place that it's touching is right in between, which is starim, that's hidden.
The top is not starim.
The top is not where it's touching. That point where it touches is concealed, right? Look at the point where it's touching is concealed. When you have two entities that are separate, that are open, and then they come and touch each other, so that's considered to be a tumah that's being transmitted through something which is open. But when you have one entity, and where are they touching? On the inside. It's not touching on the top. It's touching on the inside. It's covered. So that's based starim. Okay, think about it. That's the pshat of the Gemara over here. So therefore, the tumah does not get transmitted. So the Gemara. Well, the Ravina says that even in such a case, it's not considered to be a tumah that's concealed, and it does get transmitted. Well, the Ravina the Alma chibure oichlin lav chiburhu. When you have one piece of meat, if it's a soft piece of meat, that's what Rashi explains in another place. If it's a soft piece of meat, it's not considered to be like one piece of meat. Ukamanda mefarsi dami, it's like it's pieces. And if it's like pieces, so just like when you have any pieces that touch each other, so it's considered to be transmitting tumah from one piece to another piece. So that's not something which is concealed. It's one piece that touches another piece in an open place. So over here, when you have this limb that has the meat on it, and therefore because it's soft, it's considered to be like pieces of meat that are touching each other. So it's not tumah that's being transmitted in a concealed place. It's like pieces that are touching each other. So then according to him, what are we going to say? According to him, the tumah should be transmitted. So what's the point of peeling it away? That's touching each other, and it makes it tummy. Hello.
What's by him starim?
Huh?
What
If you have, there's a lot of different applications of base stadim. But even by food, if you have very tough food, very like hard food, so Ravina didn't say this concept that it's like it's broken. It's only like it's pieces and when it's soft. But then there's a lot of other cases of base stadim. So the Gemara says, Ella will have to say that this Mishnah that says that you can peel away the meat, the good meat that did not go out and eat it, Lamanda Masni Kizayis, the one that said before that the size that becomes tummy is a Kizayis, the less Kizayis. This Mishnah is speaking about a case where there is no Kizayis. Umanda Masni Kibetze, the less Kibetze. The one that says that the minimum size is a Kibetze, it's speaking about over here that it's not a Kibetze. That's the case when it is a point of peeling away the meat. But if it would be a kazayas and it would be a kibetza, there would be no point in peeling away the good meat that did not go out, because we can say that the whole thing becomes tummy. Maybe the gzeir of chazal does applies to this. A piece of a limb that has basar on it, and the basar is less than a kazayas. Yeah, it's a small piece of a small limb that has less than a kazayas and less than a betza. Or maybe part of it was eaten already. Yeah. Toshama, the Gemara brings a raya from another braise. It says here, Hamaitzi b'sar Pesach mechabura lechabura. You took out the meat of the korban Pesach from one group to another group. You're not allowed to do that. So afapi shehu b'loisese. Yoiver on a loisese, the Torah says you have to bebayis echad yoachol loisoitzi min abayis min abasa chutza. You're not allowed to take it out. The Gemara is soon going to talk about this more barichis. So there's a loisese here. But yet, even though you took it out, tahir, it remains tahir. So now the Gemara explains, what does this mean? My love, don't you think that what it's saying over here is tahir? This meat that you took out of its place, where it's supposed to be with your group, it remains tahir, but for aser, but it's forbidden to eat it. The yaitze mechabura lechabura, when you take your meat out of the place from your group to another group, ki yaitze chutz lemichitzasei dami, it's similar like taking it out of the walls of Yerushalayim, umifsal, and it becomes puzzle. So this is a unique thing regarding the korban Pesach. You're not allowed to take it out of Yerushalayim, and you're also not allowed to take it out of the walls of the house of the group of where you're eating it. And yet it says, Katani, the Braisa says, Tahir. The meat remains Tahir. So Alma, I see from here, Loi Gozru Rabbanan Tumeh. The Rabbanan will not Gozer Tumeh, even though when it goes out from its place and it becomes Aser, but Tumeh does not take effect. Says the Gemara, Loi. You can't learn out from this place when you took it out from your Chabura. Because over here I could say, Tahir Umutter. It's tahir, and it's actually also mutter to be eaten. True, you were over alav, you weren't supposed to take it out, but it remains tahir, and it's actually still mutter to eat it. The yaitze mechabura lechabura. When you take it out from your chabura to another chabura, lav ki yaitze chutz lemechitza sidami. It's not like taking it out of the mechitza of Yerushalayim, and v'lei mifsal. It does not become puzzle. So therefore, it also remains tahir. So you can't compare that to the question that we were discussing, whether when you took it out of Yerushalayim, whether the gzeir of Tumah applies. Says the Gemara, wait a minute, how could you say this? But Vakatani Sefer, it clearly says in the Sefer that if you took it out from your group, and you now want it, you go ahead and you eat it, you are even a loisasa. So we see that when you take it out of your group, it is similar to taking it out of Yerushalayim, and it becomes puzzle, it becomes asa to eat. So over here it clearly says that it's tahir. Even though it's aser, it's similar to taking out of Yerushalayim, but it's still tahir. So we have a clear raya that the gzeir of Chazal does not apply to this. So the Gemara says, Bishloime. Now you could say, Lamandama kebeitze, the opinion that said before, that the shear for the gzeir of Chazal, for the tumah, is only if it's a size of a kebeitze. So then I could say, what we're talking about over here is the ispe kezayis. It's a size of a kezayis, and therefore you're not allowed to eat it, because that's the size to be over the isser of eating this when it's taken out. But but it's not large enough for the tumah to take effect, and it's not, because it's not a kebeitze. That's why the Braisa said it's also to eat, but it'll still be tar, because it's not a kebeitze. So that would be understood. So you have no raya from here regarding our question whether tumah takes effect. Maybe it does, but here the case is that it's not a kebeitze. But the opinion that says that the gezeir of chazal of tumah on pigol and on noiser, and the same thing would be over here, is for kezayis. So then what are we going to say? Over here it goes out of its place, it becomes aser, just like going out of Yerushalayim, and it says that it's still tahir. So the Gemara concludes, you're right, you're going to have a very clear raya from here. Ela beyoytze bepesach loimi boyalon. When it comes to a korban Pesach that goes out of its place, whether it goes out of Yerushalayim, whether it goes out of its group, we have no question. The loy gozer rabbanan tumeh, chachama will not gozer any tumeh, as it clearly says in this braisa, tohir. And the Gemara explains, my time, why by Korban Pesach were they not geyser a tumah? Because Chachamim are not concerned that you're going to take it out of its right place. Because the Korban Pesach is always eaten with a group of people. B'nei Chabura zrizenein. So the people of the group remind each other, and they're diligent to remind each other not to take it out of the right place. So they're careful with it. So regarding it going out of its place by the Korban Pesach, Chachamim were not geyser. Elo kikami bayalon. When do we have a question whether Chachamim were geyser tumeh when it goes out of its right place? B'yoytze b'kotchem mai. By all other kotchem, when you don't have a group to remind each other, there was the question, and over there teiku. There's no answer to that question. So Taisus points out that you see in our Gemara a very interesting thing, even though we know usually regarding the Kainim that Kainim zrizenheim. Here it says actually that the people in the Chabura are zrizenheim. And regarding Kotchem it remains a question. So in this context at least, Taisus explains, you say regarding the people of the group that they're more zrizen even than the Kainim. By the Kainim it's still a teiku. Maybe Chachamim will geyser the Gzeira. And the Gemara comes back. This is today's Rambam? Oh, wow. The Gemara comes back now to this halacha of taking it out of the group. What's the exactly the source of this issue of taking it out of the group? Maitzi basar Pesach mechabura. So now taking the basar of the Pesach out of the group, mechabura lechabura, from your group to another group, minayin. From where do we know that this is an isser? And now Rashi explains the Gemara is only asking the question when both groups are on the same house. To take it out of the house where you're eating it to another house, that says clearly in the pasuk that you're not allowed to take it out of the house. Bias. But question is, even if it's in the same house, how do you know that the Isra applies as well? It says in Abraisa, the Tanya lo yiseitzi min habayis, do not take it out of the house, min habasar chutza, don't take it outside. Ein liyeh mi bayis labayis. So I would think it's only if you take it out of the house. Mechabura lechabura minayim. From where do I know that if you take it out from your group to another group, even if it's in the same house, you're not allowed to take it out to another group? It could even be in the same room. You're not allowed to take it from one group to another group. Talmud loima chutza. The Torah adds the word chutza, chutz la'achilasa. You're not allowed to take it out from the place of your group where you're eating it. That's the extra word that teaches me this. Omar Rab Ami. Rab Ami says now a very interesting halacha regarding this isser of being maitzi, the Pesach from your group. Hamaitzi b'sar Pesach mechabura lechabura. When you take out the basar from your chabura to another chabura, ein chayev achiyaniach. You're only going to be chayev if you actually placed it down in the new group where you brought it to. Why? The Torah uses the expression haitzah, leisaitzi, don't take it out. Keshabbos, and therefore we compare it to Shabbos, where the Torah also uses the term haitzah, that you're not one of the malachas, you're not allowed to take it out. So therefore, ma Shabbos ad avad akira v'anocha, just like regarding Shabbos, the full malacha of haitzah is both akira, lifting it up from the place where it was and placing it down, just taking it out, you're not over there, so it's just a half malacha. Af hachanami here as well, ad avad akira v'anocha. The issur of taking it out from the group is only if you place it down in the place that you brought it to. Otherwise, it's an incomplete act. It's not a full hitzah. Masav Rav Abba bar Mamel. Rav Abba bar Mamel asked in this from another case where the Torah also uses the term hitzah, and there it seems like that it applies even when there was no anocha. What is this talking about? So Rashi here brings the background of this braisa. It's talking about parim hanesrafim. There are certain parim that have to be taken outside of the three machnes, and they have to be burnt outside. There are 4 different karbanas Rashi brings there that have to be burnt chatois, that have to be burnt outside. And now the halacha is those kohanim that are carrying the meat to be taken outside, the moment they leave the azara, the ones that are carrying it become tomei. That's what the Torah says, that whoever's carrying it, that v'saraf begotten become tomei. It becomes tomei as soon as you go out. So now, here, let's see what the Braisa says. They were carrying this carbon on poles, on sticks, taking it out. And there were people that were standing on one side of the carbon and people on the other end, and they were carrying it together out. Harishainim, so the people in the front, they left the azara, and va'achrainim, but the people that are in the back, lo yatsu, did not leave yet. Harishainim metamin, the ones that are in the front, as soon as they leave the azara carrying this carbon out, so metamin begodim, they become immediately tomei. That's the halacha. As soon as they leave the azara, they become tomei. That's what the pasuk says. But for achrayim, the people that are in the back, that are in the behind, ein metamin begodim, they don't become tomei yet because they're still on the inside, so they don't become tomei. Now the question is, but even the people that are in the front, though they took it out already, they came out, but they didn't place it down yet. And over there the Torah also uses the term v'hoitzi esapar. And you're telling me whenever the Torah uses the term hoitzah, it means the full act of hoitzah means to place it down. So over there they didn't place it down yet. So how are the people in the front tummy? Says the Gemara, who meisav lav, who mefarik lav. Abba Bamala gave the answer. Bin nigraden. There it's speaking about a case. They weren't holding it and carrying it. They were dragging it on the floor. If you're dragging it on the floor, so every step that you're taking it, dragging it, there's a hanach. It's there. It's lying on the ground. Or Taisus actually says it doesn't have to literally be dragging it on the ground. It could be as long as it's within 3 tfachim to the ground, so it's lava to the ground, and therefore it's considered to be as if it's a hanacha on the ground. So therefore you're over as soon, or you become tameh as soon as you take it out of the azara.
If you don't do that, you're not.
So then you're not tameh, correct?
There's no way he's doing it.
Okay, so when it's done in this way, that's what this Braisa was speaking about. Zog the Mishnah. Now we quote this Mishnah that we had a few times before. Eiveh sheyatza miktsasai, a limb that part of it went out of the Yerushalayim. So what do? You cut it until you reach the bone. The kailif, and then you peel away the basa that's good. Until you come to a joint. The chaytich, and then you can cut it over there, and you throw out or you burn the other part that left Yerushalayim. Ubemugdashin, if you have a similar thing that happened to any of the other karbanis, that half of a limb went out, so over here you don't have to do this. You just kaitzitz bekufitz, you take a large knife and you cut it right over there, you break the bone through and through. Shein by mishum shviras ha'etzem. By other kachim, there's no issue of breaking the bone. Now the Mishnah will tell us exactly where is it considered to be inside and where is it considered to be outside. Mina agaf v'lifnim kilifnim. From the inside, from the doorway to the inside of Yerushalayim, that's considered to be the inside. Mina agaf v'lechutz, but from the outside of the doorway, going out of Yerushalayim, that's considered to be kelechutz. That's outside. Now, the Mishnah does not tell me what is the status of the actual thickness of the doorway itself. It just tells me that from the outside of the doorway is outside, from inside of the doorway into Yerushalayim, that's inside. What's with the doorway itself? That the Gemara will discuss. Hachalainais, windows in the walls of Yerushalayim, the thickness of those windows in the walls, or va'oivi achaymer, or the thickness of the wall itself, for example, on top of the wall, the thickness of the wall itself, kilifnim, their status is like inside Yerushalayim. Zog the Gemara. Sorry about that. Zog the Gemara. Amrav Yehuda Amarav. So Yehuda said in the name of Rav, V'chein l'tfilah. The halacha that it says over here regarding a person that's standing on the outside of the doorway, if there's a wall and they're separating who's inside and who's outside, the same thing applies regarding davening. So Rashi says, what we're talking about over here is, you have, let's say, 9 people that are inside a shul, and you have one person that's standing outside of the doorway, outside of the wall. Because he's on the outside, he can't be mitzvah to the people that are on the inside. That's Rashi's pshat. Taisus has a different pshat. Taisus says we're not speaking about such a case. We're speaking about a case where there is a minyan inside the shul, and there's a person that's outside, and he wants to be able to answer Kaddish, Kedusha with the people that are inside. You could only say Kaddish and Kedusha with a minyan. So you're outside, not together with the minyan. Could you answer Kaddish and Kedusha together with the people on the inside? So the Gemara here is saying that just like we said regarding the walls of Yerushalayim, that the one that's outside is outside, and he's not connected to the ones that are inside, you're not mitzvah to the people that are inside. Says the Gemara, O pliget, the Rabbi Shua ben Levi. So if we're applying what it said in our Mishnah to davening, so then that will be Rav will be arguing on Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Dom Rabbi Shua ben Levi, afila mechitza shel barzel enem afsekes ben Yisrael avim shebashamayim. Even an iron wall does not separate between Yidden and their Father in heaven. And therefore, when it comes to davening, we don't compare it to what it says in our Mishnah, that as the outside of the doorway, you consider to be outside. You're outside of the shul, you could still be mitzvah to the minyan, to be the 10th, according to Rashi's pshat, or according to Taisus' pshat. You could still answer Kaddish and Kedusha if you're standing outside the shul and you're hearing the minyan say Kaddish and Kedusha. Zok the Gemara. Now let's go to the Mishnah itself. Ha gufa kasha. The Mishnah contradicts itself. Amrit. First you say mina agaf v'lifnim kilifnim, from the end of the doorway going inside. So that's inside. That only that is inside of Yerushalayim. Ha agaf atzma. How about the thickness of the doorway itself? Kilachutz. It seems like from here that's outside. That's not part of the Kedusha of Yerushalayim. Aim is seife. Then what do you say afterwards? Mina agaf v'lachutz. from the end of the doorway going to the outside, that's kolochutz, that's outside. Ha'agaf atzmai, so from here it seems that the actual thickness of the doorway itself, kilifnim, that's like inside Yerushalayim. So what's the story here? Says the Gemara, loy kashye. There's no contradiction here. It depends which doorway of which gate you're referring to. Kan b'sharei azara. When we speak about the sha'arim of the azara, so over here the doorway, the thickness of the doorway itself does not have the kedusha of the azara, and kan b'sharei Yerushalayim. But the doorways of Yerushalayim, the gates of Yerushalayim, the thickness of the gates do have the kedusha of Yerushalayim. Huh? Is it the opposite? Okay, so let's see what the Gemara says here. The Amar of Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak. Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak said, "Mipnei ma." Yes, it's the opposite. Okay, "Mipnei ma lo niskachu shara Yerushalayim." So when it comes to the gates of Yerushalayim, so they were not mekadesh the gates, the thickness of the gates of Yerushalayim. Why not? Why would they not mekadesh it when they were mekadesh the whole city? Mipnei shemitziroen maginen tachtein bechama mipnei achama or b'gsham mipnei akshamim. Those mitziroen that had to be outside the city, so they wanted to allow them to have that space to be able to go under the doorway of the walls of Yerushalayim when it's raining or when it's hot to get some shade or to be protected from the rain. So therefore they weren't mekadesh that area for the mitziroen to be able to enter into that area. So that's what the Mishnah meant when it said that only on the inside of the agaf is it kadosh, but not the agaf itself, the doorway itself. That's referring to Yerushalayim. Now regarding the doorways of the Azara, so Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak said, only the doorway of the gate of Niknoir, only there the thickness of the gate was not sanctified, which means that all the other gates of the Azara were sanctified, but there's only one, Shar Niknoir, that was not. That's the place when the Mitzrayim stand there, and they enter their fingers for the client to be able to put the blood on their fingers. And the issue is that they're still Mechusik Kippurim, and so they can't enter into the Azara, but what the Torah says that you have to place the blood on their finger, and the blood is not allowed to go out of the Azara. So therefore they stand over there in the doorway, and then they stick their finger inside, and that's what's called bias miktsas. Only part of their body enters inside, and that's not a problem, and that's where the Kohen places the blood on his finger. That's why they weren't Mekadesh Shar Nikner, but all the other Sharim of the Azara, they were Mekadesh. Taisvis asks a question on this. So why were they not Mekadesh Shar Nikner why were they Mekadesh Shar Nikner? Again, they were not Mekadesh Shar Nikner for the Mitzayra to be able to stand there in that gate, to be able to stick in his finger. Be Mekadesh Shar Nikner, let him stand right outside the gate, and let him stick his finger into the thickness of the wall of Shar Nikner, and that's good enough, and put the blood on his finger right there. So Taisvis answers, one of the answers of Taisvis is because when the blood is supposed to be Lifnei Hashem, and even if you're going to say that the Shar Nikner itself, the thickness of the gate, is considered to be Kodesh like the Azara, but it's not Lifnei Hashem, and therefore you can't put the blood on his finger there, so he does have to stick it into the Azara itself.